Welcome to the second tutorial of Java Games Programming. I'm your host Zan from Zan's Gaming, and in this tutorial we'll go over loops. We'll start off with for loops, while loops, and for some reason do while loops, which I've personally never used except for the one time I had to demonstrate the use of it during an assignment. We'll then continue on using scanners, where we can take input from the user directly as the program is running. And then finally we will extend our game of odds and evens so that we can play for a certain amount of turns and take in input from the user instead of just having to hard code the input. So let's get started. In order to get started with loops, we would first start off with our class. Call it loops example. We have our method, main method. And I would just like to remind the viewers again that when we actually go over classes and methods, we will explain what's going on here. But for now, let's take it for granted. So, for loops are used to repeat code a certain amount of times where we know how many times we want to repeat the code. For example, if we want to print the numbers 1 to 10, we can do something system.out.println 1, do it again, 2, and so forth. And you can imagine this can get pretty tedious, especially if you're going over tens, imagine hundreds or thousands. So no person wants to go do this. But using for loops, we can make our lives much easier. So the way for loops work, you use the keyword for, you initialize some variables, so we use numeric value, so integer, with a name, call it count, give it some kind of condition, so we want to say that as long as it's less than 10, so we want to run it 10 times, and give it an increment, so it goes up by 1. And what do we want to do within this loop? We want to print the number. Now what's going to happen is we are going to have a variable called count. It'll start off as being 0, and this body of code will continue to will happen repetitively until count is equal to 10, or until this condition is no longer satisfied. And after each iteration of the loop, we will increment the value of count by 1. That's what count plus plus stands for. So let's test it out. We save our file. Here, Java Games Programming, loops example. Once again, recall that we have to have the same file name as our class names with .java appended at the end of it. And then load up command prompt, go where we are. We compile our code. And we run it. And then this gives us the values 0 to 9, because count starts off at 0, and as soon as count hits 10, the loop ends, basically. So in order to make sure that we want to do numbers exactly 1 to 10, we can say start count off at 1 and go as long as count is less than or equal to 10. Try this off again. Compile, run, and now we get the values 1 to 10. But do consider that there are 10 values being printed here from 0 to 9. There are 10 values being printed here, 1 to 10. And then if we actually want to do more, so we can actually do 1 to 100. And now 100 values will be being printed. Here we go. While loops fulfill the similar purpose as for loops, but they only work with a given condition instead of a initialization, a condition, and an update. So the way a while loop works is we start off with a keyword while. We give it some kind of Boolean condition here. So for example, basic Boolean conditions are evaluate to true or false, and then we give it some kind of code to execute. Let's just say hello world. Now what's going to happen here is that this loop is going to keep iterating over and over again because this will always be true. We have nothing in there that will change it. Just to show you what's going on, we're going to save our code, go back to our command prompt, compile, and run it. And this is going to keep happening until my system runs out of memory or something crashes. Or if I can stop it. There we go. So normally we want to give it something that changes, so not a constant. We can do something similar here. So we have a variable called count. Now notice that with the for loop we had to declare count, or rather we declared count within the loop parentheses. Here we're declaring it beforehand, and we want to say, well, count is less than or equal to 10, and we want to print hello world plus count, so see which one it is, and we have to take care of the increment ourselves, so count plus plus. Now this is going to print hello world 1, 2, 3, etc. up until 10. Once again, we go back to compile and run. The do while loops function very similar to while loops, except they check for the condition after the loop iteration. What I mean by here is as follows. So let's start off at how to actually write the code for this. So we start off with the keyword do, open up our curly braces, and then we have in parentheses, or rather while, and then we give it our condition. So here we're going to do the same thing again, count equals 0. So now notice count has already been declared. We cannot redeclare count as a variable, but we can reset its value. And we want to do is have another print statement. I'm using the do while loop, and I want to print the value for count. Now what's going to happen is that this loop is going to iterate at least once, because it's going to check for the condition after the iteration, not before. So if we actually compile and run this again, oops, syntax errors. And this is going to continue on infinitely because we never incremented the variable count. So let's compile again. Let's run it again, and then we get do while 0 to 10. Now, if we were to do something like this, in a while loop, we have while count is less than 0, where we have initialized the value of count as 0. I just need to update this message to while loop. And then we can do similar execution here. So we reset count to 0. We have our output statement. We have our increment of count, and then we have the condition here. What's going to happen? Run it. So we have the do while loop 0. So this statement is being printed, this particular one. However, this statement is not being printed because the check is being done up here. So what happens is, before going into the loop body, the system checks, is the value of count less than 0? Well, that's not true because count is equal to 0. So this evaluates to false, and the loop is not executed. However, here, even though the value of count is 0, it just does this once. So it executes the loop body once, and then it checks for a condition. And then when here it says, okay, well, count is equal to 1 at this point, and which is not less than 0, so it'll go false, and then it'll just move on to the rest of the code. Java allows us ways to interact with the user directly through the console, and in the case of Windows, command prompt. One such way is to use the scanner class that's provided by Java. And the way we do this, so first of all, let's get started with our class. Public class, call it scanner example. Once again, our main method. And the way we use the scanner class is, first of all, we have to import it because it's provided by Java, but however, it's not in our main folder. So import java.util.scanner. So that's our class where we can find it. And the way scanner works is we try to initialize it. So scanner, call it keyboard equals new scanner, and we pass in system.in. I promise you, eventually you'll figure out what this all means. It just takes in a bit of practice and understanding of everything that's going on. And now we can actually use our keyboard variable, or rather our scanner, to interact with the user. We can do scanner, or rather keyboard dot next line. This will provide us the next line that's being printed, or input that's being provided by the user. It'll be of type string. So input equals keyboard.next line, and now we can actually print this out. Println, the input was, and you refer to it with the variable input. We have to save it again. So scanner example.java. Let's go back to our command prompt, clear the screen, compile it, and now we run it. And unlike previous examples, this one is now waiting for us to do something. So I'm going to give it a message. Hello, my name is Zan. And we have our message being printed here. Now, it always doesn't have to be a string value. We can even work with some kind of integer value. So we can prompt the user. So please enter a number. And then we can do int num equals keyboard.nextInt. And now we can do, let's say, the times tables. For int count equals 0, count less than or equal to 10, count plus plus. What we want to do is have a print statement. And then you want to do this weird long message. So now this is going to just print the table for us. And also printing out the values. So when we place a variable like this without quotation marks around it, it'll print the value of that variable. However, when we use it in quotation marks, it prints us exactly what we put in. So this takes in as a string. The plus sign is used for concatenating strings. So this will make it into one big string and then print it on the screen. So right, we have it saved. Let's go back to our command prompt. Always compile, run it. Now it's waiting for our first input. I'm just going to call this hello. Now please enter a number, 5, and then it prints us the whole table here. And here we have scanner. Now there's much more things you can do with the scanner. For instance, having to read from a file instead of directly from the terminal. But that's a tutorial. That's a lesson for another tutorial.